Well, welcome everyone back to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, let me tell you we are the UK's largest pro-marriage organisation. We represent tens of thousands of individuals and groups from all faiths and none. And the thing that ties us together is promoting and supporting this notion of one man, one woman marriage. And yep, other things take place in society, we recognise that, but the thing that one man and one woman can do cannot be replaced with any other type of union, any other type of partnership. It's special, it's unique, it brings about the best version of the next generation. It's not our opinion. All the social research, the body of international social research confirms that, and we just think that needs to be noticed, it needs to be recognised, it needs to be promoted, it needs to be celebrated in life and in school and all sorts of other areas of public life for what it is and what it does. Marriage is great. Now, it's a real privilege to have with us today somebody who very much agrees with that, so much so that he's tweeted about it and lost his job. Let's say hello to him first of all, Dr. Aaron Edwards.
Yeah, hello, and really great to be on this show and great to have heard about the great work that the Coalition for Marriage is doing. It's such an important issue for our time.
Privileged to talk to you. We met, of course, at a conference last week, which we might talk about a little bit because there's some quite interesting elements there. But of course, just for our listeners, our viewers, a very quick catch up. You're a very live story because you recently tweeted about what's going on in the Church of England and how homosexuality seems to be dominating the debate, blah, blah, blah. And you lost your job for doing that. You've been sacked. But not only have you been sacked from a job, you've been sacked from your job as a lecturer in a Bible college. So
that's right.
Interesting things. Now, and again, you're a man with your marriage. You've got 5 kids. You lost your job. You lost your home, Aaron, and still you've got this wonderful spirit about you because you think what you're doing is right. You're saying the right things for the right reasons in the right way, and you feel that's a good thing to do. And that is such an appealing thing to come across, such a breath of fresh air to come across somebody of your character. Tell us a little bit about the story. Have I got it right? Have I missed anything out?
Yeah, no, thanks, Teddy. And if I have a good spirit, it's his spirit. So that's a good thing and something we all hope to grow more in all the time in terms of what it means to walk in the fruit of the Spirit. And I think, I guess, it might be, you're right. All that stuff's happened, and we're currently in a rental flat, a very nice rental flat with beams, as you can see, but one that we've been living in for nearly 4.5 years, and we happened to get an eviction notice the week after my dismissal. I don't think the two were related. The conspiratorial part of me thinks maybe they were, but I'll give the silent landlord the benefit of the doubt. It just happened to be strange timing, and so all the plans I had of what the next steps were going to be after this dismissal, which was shocking and difficult anyway, were very disrupted by that. So we've been then house hunting and then living half out of boxes and things like that, which has been very stressful for our family, especially as we homeschool. So my wife is there trying to box stuff up and carry on the lessons for the different age groups and things. And it's a huge challenge. But in terms of the issue itself, it was, I tweeted that homosexuality is invading the church. And that evangelicals no longer see the severity of this because they're busy apologizing for their apparently barbaric homophobia, whether or not they are actually guilty of homophobia. They're just saying, I'm so sorry to the LGBT community.
I'll stop you just there. So for anybody who doesn't know, for anybody who's had their head in a bucket of sand for a while, this is all about the idea that the Church of England, the Church in Wales, many other bodies of the Christian community are now endorsing, promoting, supporting, blessing same-sex unions. And the point is that the Bible seems to me to be perfectly clear that that is in fact something which it calls sin. Irrespective of whether society believes in the concept of sin or anything else, from a church point of view, that seems to be quite clear. And so you seem to be making a statement of fact. Okay. And so what happened?
Yeah, so I think that, as you say, it's a statement of fact that people aren't prepared to even conceive of because this Overton window shifted. So what's politically acceptable to say has shifted. So we don't say homosexuality is a problem or a sin, even though I know you'll have listeners who have all sorts of different views or not from a Christian perspective. I was making a Christian theological point to say that homosexuality doesn't have a positive place in the church. It doesn't theologically. It doesn't in the Bible. And so when it's coming into the church, it's an invasion from the world. It's not something that's good. And yet we've been taught to say, oh no, homosexuality is fine and or neutral, as long as, you know, we have our own particular expressions and we keep our beliefs and views about this kind of thing private. And I just started to realize, no, that when you stop talking about it, things like this happen. The Church of England will do what it's been doing. So you need to speak out about those things. So yeah, it's a statement of fact that this is just happening, and we're like sat there apologizing because we're worried about offending people. I think we're the ones who are being offended right now as Christians.
So many things I could unpack in that short statement of yours there. And I want to come on to the fact that Christians get offended too. But let's go back a little bit, first of all, because you mentioned that, and we've got to separate out. There is this issue of what the church or what the Bible seems to say about homosexuality. And that seems to me to be quite clear. That in itself is different from the issue of are people who are same-sex attracted welcome in the church? Because yes, of course, they absolutely are. Just like anything else the Bible categorizes as sin is welcome in the church. That's what the church is for. It's there for sinners. So yes, you are. But the idea is that you come, you repent, you become converted, and then you change. And you become more Christ-like, as the Bible says. So that's one thing. And all of that is separate to the issue of, well, is whatever same-sex people do when they hook up, can we call that marriage in the wider spectrum of things, even outside the church? And we come at it from irrespective of whether or not we're all Christians, we come at it from the point of view of actually the secular evidence seems to say there's something that a man and a woman does together, which other types of couple cannot do. And that's just so plain-facedly obvious as to be beyond remark, you know. But it is that, and it's that special thing which seems to bring about best results when kids are raised by their biological married mum and dad, and that's irrespective of what the church says. The secular evidence base makes that quite clear. Yet we seem to be forgetting that in society as well. And the people who are suffering in society are generally speaking on the poorer part of the socioeconomic spectrum, because the wealthier off and the better off are marrying and staying married and enjoying all the benefits. And those who are listening to the rhetoric aren't and are suffering even more than they were before. And that's the absolutely terrible thing. Even if you're not a Christian listening to this, that's the gutting thing about redefining marriage. So anyway, we'll delve into some of that. But so, I want to know a little bit about, I mean, you are a resilient guy. I can just tell that straight away. And you're a very positive, optimistic kind of guy. But it must have hurt when your employer kind of turns on you like that for something you think isn't this mainstream Christianity.
Yeah, no, it was really difficult. It was, I was in tears on the, coming back from a prayer meeting on the day of the tweet, where the tweet storm had gone crazy and the college had publicly denounced me already, so I knew something was coming. And it was just, there's just this feeling that you've sort of you've kind of put a jackhammer in your career and can't provide for your family, that kind of thing. And it was really, really hard and challenging. But I also just knew I did really have a clear sense. I'd thought about this tweet. I like to think I think about all the things that I say. Obviously, we can all make mistakes, but it wasn't a clumsy tweet. It wasn't the kind of thing where I was like, I'll just chuck this out because I'm just a bit annoyed at gay people or something. It wasn't even targeted at gay people. It was targeted doctrinally against evangelicals who are accepting of sin, and therefore it denigrates marriage, which is, what I've also used language, in other forums. I would say marriage is the institution of the bringing in of same-sex marriage is like the abolition of marriage, because you're changing what marriage is. It's not just saying, we're just expanding marriage. No, you're not expanding it. You're abolishing what it was to create a new structure where you've allowed more things. And same-sex marriage won't be the only thing that comes into there. We'll have all sorts of other arrangements which will come in and are coming in already. But actually, that's a completely separate thing to your point, your question. So yeah, it was very painful. I realized that I was just there before God going, you're all I've got, so if I put my hope in anything else, which we shouldn't anyway as Christians, I realize especially there's nothing else but who I am before God and what he wants to do with my life. And so I was happy to make the sacrifice for him, because that's what my life as a Christian is supposed to be. And we pay lip service to that, and I've paid lip service to that before, and feeling that challenge, I knew that I had to take that challenge on and take that on the chin, but it was not easy. I did have heart palpitations for a couple of weeks. Had to go to the hospital and get a kind of scan and things like that because I had stress all at my left side of my body, and they were like, a GP wouldn't even see me because they said, you've got cardiac symptoms, you have to go to hospital. I said, I'm pretty sure it isn't that, it's just severe stress, but we won't even see you. You need to go straight to hospital and get a kind of cardiology scan. And I think that was just very hard because I just knew that when you know you're hated or loathed, or even, you know, you've disappointed everyone around you. So even the evangelicals and people who are conservative, they'd be disappointed in me for speaking out like this. That's just difficult. Like there's the hate that you get from people who are totally progressive, secular, or aggressively anti your position, which is more obvious. You can sort of expect it. It's still hurtful, but even the more hurtful thing is those who might be closer to you, who just think you're stupid or just think you're foolish and won't even contact you. They want to disassociate from you because they're like, you're ruining their witness, that kind of thing. So you just know that you've lost friends, you've lost allies, you've lost comrades, and that's a huge challenge. It was very hurtful, and I think it did all spiral out of what the college has done. It puts me in a bad box, as it were, in many people's eyes.
And you had an opportunity to take it back, to take the tweet down and to apologize, and you said no. Which, wow, excellent. That's amazing. Tell us a little bit about what was going through your mind at that time.
Yeah, it was like I got, apparently the college had sent me an email on the Sunday afternoon. I don't check work emails at the weekend. And so they'd already publicly denounced me though by that point. They didn't try and call me or anything. They put it out there. I was shocked when I came back from church in the afternoon and be like, whoa, 25,000 people are swarming around my tweet. And the college, a couple of hours ago, the college has already denounced me. I'm 2 hours late to my own denouncement. And then there's so much other stuff. And there's not many people coming in support of me. And so that was really hard. And then I knew that something was going to happen the next day. Something was going to go down. But I see, in my head, I'm still thinking, look, there's going to be some really awkward conversations, but I'll get into work, I'll get some stuff done and see what happens. There's an email waiting for me when I open my inbox on Monday morning that had come in on Sunday afternoon. We think what you've said is breaches the social media policy. We are aware of the situation, etc. Very kind of removed language, like I don't know these people, despite the fact I know them very well, the leaders of the college. And then at this point, we'd just like to ask you to take it down. And I said, I'd like to have a further conversation. I can't take it down in good conscience because obviously even the harassment I've received, firstly, I believe it and I don't think I should have to take it down. Secondly, I should especially not have to take it down in light of the harassment. You're putting me in a position where I'm now having to be a coward and jump back from what I've said because of the flack. And I've already publicly come out and said, since the tweet, I quote tweeted it and responded to people and said, this isn't homophobic. I'm not against gay people. I'm not kind of attacking people or any individual. I'm not putting the college in disrepute because I'm trying to say this is not a view that everyone in the college would express, but this is my view, etc. But it's still an evangelical conservative view which ought to be expressed. So I think I did all that I could do publicly to try and make sure the college wasn't brought into any disrepute, but they disagreed. My response to that email was, can you come to a meeting later this day? And so I was like, okay, is that when we're going to have the conversation that I've asked for? And at that meeting, the first thing the principal said was like, this isn't going to be a conversation. I'm going to read you your suspension letter. And so I had that read to me, told I have to be off-site within half an hour or they'll send someone to my office to escort me off-site as a criminal or something. And I think they heard the fact that was hurtful. I did say that, I said, how do you think that makes me feel? Like I'm so harmful apparently to the students that I need to be removed from my office. And then people obviously would say, well, that's just process. That's just what you have to do with an investigation. So they sold it to me and I was like, okay, fair enough. You've got a situation. You've had so many complaints about this tweet. You need to remove me from the situation and investigate, and it's all impartial. So I said, that's fine. I mean, I didn't like it, but I was shocked that that could happen so quickly. But if it's just process and protocol and they have to do it, I'm fully in my head assuming I'll be back to work in 2 weeks. 2 weeks comes by, they extend the suspension by another half week as they finish the compiling of the report. And then as I received that report, I was just shocked what I was reading. A 17-page report on my tweet, all the different ways of how terrible it is, and all the bad water it puts the college in, the bad light it puts in, and nothing in support of me at all. Totally not an impartial report. It was a very partial report. Given that I'd had loads of support by that point publicly from evangelicals. And so it was a really strange thing to see that what I was told didn't seem to really come out. And I challenged that, and it fell on deaf ears, really. So yeah, it was a very fast process, and I was then shocked to then find out that I was likely to be fired. And I still, at that point, I got this terrible damning report. I still thought, they can't fire you. Surely they're going to offer you some kind of warning, and then a final warning or whatever, and then we can negotiate. And I can say, well, actually, I don't think I should even receive a warning for this, but at least you'd expect to have that. Like, right, well, don't say things like that again. Let's clarify what we mean by what we can and can't say, or tell us just not to tweet at all our views, which I don't think would be good for academic free speech anyway. So there's all these things I just thought, there's no way they'll fire me. And then just an employment lawyer said, that's what's going to happen. This is an absolute, by the book play, and this is how it always works, and this is what they're preparing the ground for dismissal. And so over the disciplinary, it's almost like a theatre. You're just going through the motions. I'm giving all my arguments, but I know it almost feels like this is just going to happen anyway. And so I was fired, and they could have made it worse. They could have given me. I got a 3-month severance payment at least. So I don't want to completely say they're terrible in that regard, but they were still doing something that was going to completely would destroy my career, really. And in terms of what I was doing as a lecturer in a Bible college, it would seem then you're sort of a bad egg.
Yeah, and you've been supported, or you are being supported by the wonderful Christian Legal Centre, I understand. And we're not going to talk about your next steps because we don't know what they are, and that's for you to decide. But it's great that there are organisations like that out there to support people in your position who have done nothing more than gently state their faith. And doing so, we need to make this point, doing so per se is not homophobic. It doesn't indicate that you hate or fear anybody, let alone an entire group of people. That's not what that is. It's expressing your opinion on what you see as relevant facts, and doing so. And in fact, the law protects us. Section 29JA of the Public Order Act. If we discuss sexualities or the parties to a marriage, it is not in and of itself deemed to be hateful, because it's if you do it in a hateful, vicious, nasty manner, that's your own fault. But I don't think it's not what you are. You were just making a point, and a point based on evidence in the news all around us, which is a funny old place to be in.
Exactly. The only thing that they would just say, that people who've been against me would say, well, they wouldn't see what I did as gentle, and I think this is a misunderstanding of how people see things. So because I use the language invading, they would say, well, that's just a terribly emotive term. You're assuming that. Well, I said, well, what else do you want me to say? It's a technical term, actually, to say invading. Like if it's something that's coming, it's a kind of, let's say, a foreign influence that isn't supposed to be there within a city, and it's not coming from within. It's coming from without, and so that is an invasion because we didn't ask for it to come, and now we're actually opening the gates and saying, come on in, come in, rainbow flags, and set up shop and do what you like, and actually hang your flags from the ramparts, because that's actually what an invasion is. So it's offensive because people then think, well, are you saying that I am part of the invasion? That's actually not. Again, that's just not the point. It's saying that this is sin, and this is something that the Bible defines as sin, and therefore entering the church. So I still think you can say that in a gentle way.
And sacking somebody for using the word invade instead of take over or occupy, that sounds like a funny reason to dismiss someone if what they're saying is they agree with the fundamental principle. But do they? Because here's the other funny thing. I often talk about a Comres report from October 2018, which was an anonymous survey of MPs, and of those who responded, over half said they were too fearful to express their true feelings around these kind of issues, LGBT issues. And this is I just can't get over this, Aaron. This is our lawmakers, the people who presumably vote on the laws with these feelings and hiding their conscience because they're too scared to admit it. I can't get over where we are, and that we're in such a fearful state as a country that those and it has a chilling effect. So we've interviewed Maureen recently. other people who've been in the same situation as you and have been exonerated, you know. But the point everyone makes is that there's a chilling effect. Dragging you through the process makes sure that the people behind you think, hold on, you know, he for whatever reason, by the grace of God, him and his 5 kids have been able to put food on the table and have found a house to put the table in. I'm scared that I might not, you know, and I get that fear, and that chilling effect that stops open, free, honest discourse is absolutely awful. And I don't know what we do about that, to be honest with you, apart from people like you and others standing up and saying, well, I'm going to speak anyway, and moving that Overton window, as you referred to. I don't know what else there is from that point of view, because I mean, I'm guessing, no need to be indiscreet here, but I'm guessing your wife was saying, are you sure you're right about this? Because mine was when I was in a similar situation.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely, Tony, you're right. And you know, I'm also glad of people like you speaking out, and it's so helpful. Though I only just met you recently as well. It's great to meet you know, allies in this cause of people who are willing to speak out, because there's many Christians who would agree with what you and I believe about marriage, but don't think it's our place to say so publicly. Even from the pulpit in churches, people are scared to speak, and I just think this is the failure of the church in so many ways, in not only allowing things like this to come in, but in disempowering and discouraging, literally discouraging, to take away the courage to stand up and speak and say, oh no, you mustn't do that. It would be imprudent and unwise to do that. And therefore the preachers follow the model of the leaders of the organizations and go, right, well, we better watch our reputation if they're watching their reputation. And then they were trained at colleges that watch about their reputation. And suddenly what we're allowed to say from the Bible unashamedly, it just gets minimized every year on year at the moment. There are things you just don't want to say. But yeah, you go back to, you know, my wife on the Sunday evening or the day of the tweet, she was still in the place of kind of like, what are we going to do? Worried, as I think any good wife would be, kind of, what does this mean? And maybe couldn't you have phrased your tweet a little differently, darling? I was kind of like, well, yes, that is. I think if she'd written the tweet, it might have sounded very different. But I just thought, well, yeah, I could have done, but I just feel this is right. This is the moment we have to say things like this. I'd said a load of other stuff similar to it, just that this happened to be the tweet storm. But then I went to the prayer meeting that evening, and this is what I would encourage Christians with who are worried about stepping out. Like, God is real. He's not just this idea. He's not just this religious framework. Oh, we need God to make sense of our life, and it gives us a kind of ritual every week to go to on a Sunday, maybe a Wednesday night at a Bible study. It's not just that. There's a lot of conservatives now who are using the idea of God as a way to kind of, as a guarantor of meaning in general. And fine, it's true. It's better to believe God exists than live a life and have a society where we don't believe there's an ultimate power who will judge us. But it's more than just that. It's like God is relatable and wants to see us step out in faith and trust him. So I was just very confident, despite being completely racked with worry on the day. I did have a lot of faith, knowing that God was going to care for us. So I came home from the prayer meeting. Someone happened to have given me an envelope with £300 in at the prayer meeting. They didn't know anything about my situation. They said, this is what God said, I want to encourage you in your ministry, and I feel like God's saying you're going to write books and they're going to help impact the church. And I said, oh, I could do with this money probably. It might help me pay the rent in future weeks. And why? And I'm telling him the situation. And they said on the envelope, loved by God. And I came home from that prayer meeting that Sunday evening, and I said to Molly, I was like, we're going to be okay. This is only the first fruits of God's provision. He's going to provide for us. And I could tell you unbelievable stories of how much God's provided for us since that point. It's unbelievable. And so I'm not trying to say that will magically happen in exactly the same way, but I just think that God means what he says when he says, you can trust me and I will honor those who honor me. So the fear that the let's say the LGBT agenda or just the general progressive secularism in our culture will try to make you feel fearful as a Christian, or anyone with principles who wants to stand up on them. You shouldn't be scared of it, but especially a Christian who can actually trust in a God who is living and active. And I think that's the kind of thing I would say we need to encourage more people to speak out, irrespective of what might happen to them, if it's relevant and necessary to do so. I know that there are moments where you might say, okay, there is prudence, there is wisdom, there are ways of speaking that we need to think about and temper those. But I just think that right now, these are the kind of issues we must be speaking about.
And I mean, I suppose we've got people listening, watching from all faiths and none. I think, there's a lot of Christians, as you'd expect. And so from the two perspectives then, firstly, you're absolutely right. Christians have got no excuse because we've been given the Great Commission, which interestingly is not just about telling people that Jesus lived and died in order to pay the punishment for their sins and that they must repent. But he also says, and teaching them everything I have taught you. So all of the Great Commission involves us taking everything he's taught us into society. And that's what being salt is, stopping the rate of decay, adding flavour, and if the salt loses its saltiness, there's nothing left. There's no other hope, So that's from the Christian perspective. But even if you're a non-Christian watching this, you don't need to learn, and I don't want to over-dramatise this, but you don't need to learn too much about Soviet Russia, Maoist China, just to see how, once a society begins saying these are things you cannot talk about, these are things you're not allowed to criticize, these are things you must say, or you will lose your job and go to jail. That's a beginning of a pretty bad place to be, and we just need to, irrespective of what the subject matter is, we don't want to live in a society that says that, because that isn't very good at all.
No, that's right. And that's the Christian influence within society. Again, anyone who's listening who isn't a Christian and is apathetic to it or agnostic or even atheist, but just has some kind of strong conservative principles that marriage is a good idea. Well, you think marriage is a good idea basically because of Christian influence in society. That's why you think marriage is a good idea, because it's influenced culture, and we've seen enough narratives of it and seen the fruit of good marriage in society and other Christian values and principles which would show you that. And the Christian influence in society has also been the guarantor of so much free speech as well. I know that there's been problems in the church's past with that. Spanish Inquisition, for example, would be an obvious one. But we're seeing a worse version of an Inquisition. The secular progressive Inquisition today is horrendous, and it's actually it's not inconsistent with the kind of principles of what that worldview is. So that those who think, well, I can have the principles without the sort of religious paraphernalia around it. Well, I don't know if you can. The kind of world we're seeing built around us and destroyed around us is a battleground of different ideologies and worldviews. And it's you just anyone who knows history, you can just see the influence of actual Christian virtue in Western society has led to so much, and it did help protect tolerance and diversity. There's the famous book by Tom Holland, secular historian. He wrote a book called Dominion, The Making of the Western Mind, which many people have quoted and cited in recent years. And the final chapter of that book is called Woke, I think, where he's looking at all of the kind of diversity, tolerance agendas today of the progressives and saying, these are just kind of cut flowers, off of the kind of Christian bouquet. Well, actually, not probably from the flower bed. We've taken them out of the flower bed, we cut the flowers off, and we're just going to use these. We like these two. We like the Good Samaritan. We like looking out for the downtrodden and the downcast, which is fine. But you can't really sustain that if you take them out of the soil in which they are planted.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. And we met at a conference, which kind of builds on that last week, I think it was, wasn't it? Which I thought was strangely named National Conservatism with a small c. And I get what they were saying, but in fact, I spoke to many people at that conference who were politically estranged from the left and politically estranged from the right. The reason being that it used to be that both Labour and Conservative supported family values, and they would argue about the best economic way of prospering families. Yep. However, where we've gone to now is that economically, Labour and Conservative seems to be pretty down the line, and they've both abandoned families. And so you've got this massive group of people who are just politically bereft. And it was interesting how at the conference it spoke an awful lot, and people spoke, generally speaking now, there are obviously exceptions, people spoke an awful lot about an awful lot of different things. But economically, it was like, well, there are different ways of doing things. But the family, that's the thing we need to restore, because, flag, family, a faith, those are things we need back in society, because they underpin, they stabilize culture in a wonderful way. And I just think that's quite, you come across people taxi drivers. In fact, almost everyone I speak to ends up bringing up conversations about, we think what's happening with family and all that sort of stuff is terrible, and we need to start supporting that stuff again. And we just do. And I don't know why. I don't know why the political parties just don't, recognise that and move towards that. It staggers me.
No, it's amazing. Yeah, and I think it's there's I've not even heard of. Is it Yoram Hazony? Is that have I got his first name correct? The Jewish kind of conservative philosopher who was kind of the brains behind national conservatism. And there've been other national conservative conferences around the world. It's interesting that his talk, he was promoting nationhood and saying Britain as Britain is a good idea. I'm not even British, but I think British is a great Britishness. Two British people should be celebrated, just as he's from, I think presumably he's from Israel, and so he supports Israeli nationalism, and he'll support US nationalism. He's saying nationalism is a good thing. Now, we've actually come trained in our mind to think nationalism is bad because of National Socialism, and that, of course, many people on the left looked at the conference and said, well, sounds a bit like National Socialism. As well, it isn't.
Don't go doing a Douglas Murray on us, will you?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, we'll get in trouble. That's right. That was his point, wasn't it? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. If you're listening, go and look it up. We're not going to do that again.
That's right. We'll save Tony a bit of flack in the comments. But there is a connection actually between caring for your nation and family. Like, I know it doesn't sound like obvious, but there is a connection because it's kind of like your people. Now, it can be xenophobic. When you get jingoism, where people go, well, I care only for me and my kin, and therefore I'm not going to be welcoming to the other. Well, that's not what this is talking about at all. Obviously, there's quite a lot of diversity represented at the conference. But I just think there is actually more of a connection than you'd realise between those who want to say that nations caring about being themselves and being self-governed and having a cultural distinctiveness is a good thing. And it's kind of setting itself against globalism, which would be the idea that let's just become more and more the same, monocultural, more like multiculturalism in Britain, for example, which is basically like all just agree and stop caring about your individual cultures and become monocultural. That's not actually a very interesting world, and it's also quite a dangerous totalitarian vision. But everyone would say, well, that's a terrible, that's a conspiracy theory. It's not that everyone sat down going, let's create a global empire. But nationalism kind of protects the diversity of nations and peoples in a way that can be very welcoming and helpful. And as I said, there's a link between that, caring about where you come from and your family, and therefore the nation you're from. And I think G.K. Chesterton, who was quoted endlessly throughout the conference, he said you will that the one who has not learned to love their own country will not be able to love another country, someone of another country. So if you want to care for other nations and say, I really care about diversity, learn to love your own traditions and culture, and then you'll be able to love theirs and understand why they want to love theirs.
Yeah, and of the 800 people who were at that conference, which was just so passionately focused around family, around half were under 30, the organisers said, which is incredible. Great that, so many young people are passionate about restoring family values in our country, which is a great thing. And the other thing we've been looking at recently, which is kind of flinging off that, if you like, and I know that you've been active in these areas online too, is the idea that in a very short period of time, we see about 4 years, we seem to have moved from a position where if you'd said, a woman can have male genitalia or a man can menstruate, you would have been called insane. But today we've got people in the newspaper for having lost their jobs for not calling a boy she or vice versa. And even we've got Parliament talking about banning so-called conversion therapy, such that if you do anything other than affirm these things, you become a criminal. In a period of 4 years, we've gone from you must be nuts to even suggest that's the case to you will be criminalised if you don't support and celebrate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what I tweeted earlier today was what was laughed at in one half decade will be legislated in the next half decade. And I think this is exactly, I saw that clip from you posting that, and I just was like, that is astonishing. And we've seen various versions of this. It's almost like, I know some people might get almost a fatigue at pointing out the contradictions and ludicrousness of this, of wokeness. We've been doing it for like 3 or 4 years, and of course there are moves to be like, right, part of the thing of that conference was how do we actually build something then, rather than just complaining about the woke stuff. But we are seeing a scary thing happen. So there's still people who need to wake up to woke, as it were. They need to wake up to what's happening. It's so fast how things are moving, and in similar ways to previous instantiations of, let's say, totalitarianism, where there was more suppression of free speech. It does come in very quickly. people go, oh, everything will be fine, and suddenly the window shifts, and within a decade, everything is completely different. And I think we've already seen that. There are people who are alive today who are like, hang on, we didn't always used to have to say this or think this, or we were allowed to say this previously without losing our jobs. And this is the scary thing we're dealing with today. Many have made the connection to George Orwell's 1984, which I think many people need to read that book. I think many cite that book and say Big Brother, etc., kind of a big state controlling things, but they need to read that novel. It's a brilliant novel, and in it, George Orwell, who wasn't himself a Christian, would even probably have called himself a socialist at one time, but I think really he was just annoyed at the right and the left, a bit like some of these people at the conference. And he actually, and what happens in that book, they've got the changing of history and the changing of the narrative, so that the main character in the novel, one of his jobs is to destroy records of history and to rewrite them so that they're politically favourable to the current time. So
can I just point out? We have something called a Gender Recognition Act, way back from 2004, in which you can actually rewrite and invent history and say that you were born in a sex other than the one you were actually physically born in.
Oh my goodness, that's astonishing. Yeah, I didn't know that.
It is, yeah, and this is actually on our statute books. I cannot believe it. I cannot believe it, but that's where we are. And that isn't to say, right, adults get to do what they want to do and live the lives they want to live within the constraints of the law, etc., etc., but the law mustn't do silly things like that. You mustn't reinvent history and create fictitious pasts and say that simple biology can be ignored. We've got to have, and this is where you were coming from with your kind of Tom Holland Dominion stuff, that actually there are some fundamental rights and wrongs and yes and no's that underpin stability in society, and we shouldn't forget those things. And if we do, we forget them at our peril, if you like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much to say on that. I think it's a huge danger. We like I said, we need to wake up to it. So those who are kind of still a bit squeamish about speaking out need to speak out, because these are issues which they'll come for you. They're going to come for things. You think that whatever you currently believe, I wouldn't talk about that. I don't need to worry about that bit of this, a culture war. I don't need to worry about it. I'll just keep believing this and living like this. They'll come for you in the end. These things, this is getting worse, and we can see it. We've got a track record here, and we've got historical comparatives to go, look, this is what happens when we stop caring about free speech and belief.
It's worth noting, Aaron, because and I was going to ask you have you got any advice for people? And my wife always said, the difficulty for people like you and me giving advice is that we've perhaps had the sort of experiences that makes us give advice which might be a bit too much for other people to take. And I get that, but it's like at the conference again, there were some people shouting and screaming out the front, weren't there? And it's funny because there's a couple of books. There's Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. There's another one which is called Beautiful Trouble. I think it's a collection of writings, so has different authors. But these are guidebooks as to if I can call them agitators, maybe, who disagree with the standard way of life, and that actually I don't want you to associate with a family. I want you to associate with an identity group, and I'm going to try and push that forward. And it's interesting because what they were doing at the conference is actually written down in the book as a tactic, and it's there to provoke one of two reactions in you, either to crush you and make you give in, or to make you overreact. And when you overreact, you become the story. Okay, that's the tactic. So we need to recognize that as Christians, as people who are speaking up, that A, they will come for you, B, they will bring their friends, C, they've got no arguments, so they're going to insult you physically, mentally, academically, any other way they can, and D, they'll go for your employer if they can too, because that's what they do. But once you realize that is the game, that is a tactic, you are better than that, you can just call it out for what it is and say, I'm not going to overreact, I'm not going to give you what you want, but neither am I going to ignore you, because I know that this is right and this is true and this is best for society. Have you got any advice, any words of support or encouragement to people who are thinking, actually, I don't like having to say these things or do these things in work. I want to try and stand, but I'm scared I'm going to lose my job. I can't afford to do that.
Yeah, and it may, and the advice will probably differ if they're not a Christian or Christian or maybe of another religion, of course, because there'll be Muslims maybe who feel similarly. The Muslims tend to speak up about their beliefs in a stronger way than Christians do, and they respect Christians more. When I've interacted with Muslims, when they do actually stand up for their beliefs. But so, especially to the Christian, I would certainly say, be open to what the Bible is saying. And I think you may think you know what the Bible says on certain topics, but I would just spend time in Scripture. My convictions have come primarily from spending a lot of time reading Scripture and finding it embarrassingly different to the things I'm seeing in the world, and even from the platforms of Christian institutions who are trying to protect their reputation. And I might agree with that Christian institution, but on loads of things they would agree with me, but I think there's loads that they're not saying. And I kind of kept thinking, look, there's so much wisdom in this. This is what God has given us. And Jesus says that those who obey, who hear and do my words, are the people who build their house on a rock. So the storm will come, and the houses that look great on the sand, and the ones who are laughing at you up on your little rock, trying to build your house, which is very difficult because the rock doesn't move for your foundations. You've got to make the foundations of your house fit the rock. And it's not straightforward and easy. Sand is malleable. You go and set up a house in a day on sand, that's easy. But when the storm comes, those are the houses that fall away. So I would just say that believe those words of Jesus and apply them to the rest of the Bible. And go, wow, okay, everyone's going to call me all sorts of names. They might get me fired, whatever it is. But I'm going to believe this because I believe that this is the eternal truth and this is wisdom. And I can see the fruit of people who've built their house on the rock. And there are storms, and they're going to be the ones that survive. And right now, what looks like the reality won't be the reality. Things will move on. In 10 years, who knows? There might be a complete change. So don't hook yourself to this scared kind of wagon of people who are kind of worried, oh, what might happen? The powers that be right now may not be the powers forever. And so just have a bigger vision and have an eternal perspective and say, actually, I know who I can trust and I know where to build my house. And if you're not a Christian, well, even if you're not a Christian, I'd still recommend you read the Bible. There's also another book called Live Not by Lies, which Rod Dreher wrote. He was supposed to speak at the conference. He got injured, I think, and couldn't. But it's actually called A Manual for Christian Dissidents, but it could actually apply to anyone who's in a totalitarian regime. And he's interviewing people from Eastern Europe during the Soviet era who were forced to comply with certain things of the party. And some of the tactics and kind of insights that could be employed in there it's really helpful. So that's Live Not by Lies. So I'd say just fundamentally, that's a Solzhenitsyn phrase, when he came out of Soviet Russia, to go, that's what we need to do. We need to not live by lies. We need to at least not agree, not say that black is white or white is black. You've got to start there. So whatever that means in your workplace, don't do something that you knowingly know to be wrong. So that fundamental integrity is vital. And of course, things may happen to you. They will come with their friends, as you say, and they will throw everything they can at you. I think we've just got to be prepared to take those hits and go, okay, maybe I'll lose my job. Maybe I'll lose some friends. Maybe people will say this or that about me. But you've got one life, and live it with integrity. Don't live a kind of false life where you keep your friends and you keep your money, maybe keep your house, but actually you've lost your soul in the process. So they may throw pitchforks at you, but they may tempt you to not say anything and be quiet and to keep your comfort. Many people have supported totalitarian regimes who didn't agree with them, but they were kind of paid off essentially. And so you mustn't do that. Don't lose your integrity, and actually in the end you'll be the one who comes out stronger.
And there's nothing like the feeling of knowing that you're standing for the truth and having done all, as it says, to remain standing. There's nothing like, but I get, and people, if your employers want you to go to an HR course, you've got to go. That's your obligation. But what you haven't got to do is agree to say something that you fundamentally disagree with. That's not what you've got to do, because you're if it disagrees with your faith, well, that's something else. But everyone's got to look at these things carefully for themselves.
Yes, of course.
And it is good that we have more and more people and more cases. And yours will add to that body of weight, which is great. So, and it's just amazing to think, this isn't stuff that happened 5 years ago. This was last month. You tweeted in February. Last month you were sacked. This is fresh and raw, and here you are standing and promoting the idea of speaking up and speaking your mind and saying what you believe in boldly. It's just amazing. It really, really is. And there you are, 5 kids, no home, and still saying, "Yeah, I'd do it again." again. That's absolutely amazing. Are you going to write books, or what? I mean, in the intervening time, what are you going to do? You mentioned somebody said you should write books.
Yeah, I've already got a list of books I want to write, and there's a few I've got proposals in with publishers and working with at the moment. Of course, the problem is now there are many publishers who won't touch you, so you have to find new publishers who are willing to say things that are challenging. And so there's a few articles I've been writing on this already anyway, and there's some, it's interesting finding new networks where people are speaking about things and allowed to speak. So there's a few things on political education, on the gender issue and all sorts. Yeah,
we'll put up your Twitter handle so people can follow you on Twitter. Have you got a Substack or a website or anything?
Yeah,
like that?
That good fight is my Substack where I talk about these kind of things. Yeah.
Well, we'll put that up too so people can and we'll keep an eye on where you are. You and I will stay in touch, I'm sure. And then perhaps when and if things progress and something else happens, we'll have you back to talk more about the great things that you're doing and the great stand you're making. Aaron Edwards, what a huge privilege. Thank you so much for your time today.
Anyways, you too. God bless. Tony. Speak again soon. Bye-bye.